Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Nehemiah chapters 4 through 6 in our continuing study of the historical books. We already looked at an overview of the book of Nehemiah. Notice that the first half of the book deals with the work of rebuilding the wall. We're not finished with that. We're coming up to chapter 4. After that, we're going to see the worship that takes place and how that's going to need to be, uh, some problems are going to need to be fixed. So we have rebuilding the wall and reviving the people. As we said, chapter 3 gives us the work assignments, but now they're getting to the job itself. And so, as they begin the work of rebuilding the wall, we see a conspiracy of opposition. There are those that don't want to see it rebuilt. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now it came about that when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry and mocked the Jews. So his reaction, mockery, because he wants to try to dissuade them. He wants to try to get them to lose heart. Verse 2. And he spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria. After all, he's in the Samaritan area. He's up to the north of Israel, and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing?" And notice the loaded words. Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive the stones from the dusty rubble, even the burned ones? It looks hopeless. What do they think they're doing, those silly old Jews? Verse 3. Now Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he said, so you've got Sanballat, he's the governor of the area. Tobiah, a man of some influence from Ammon, that's the area to the east of the Jordan River and actually east of the Dead Sea. Even what they are building, the work that if a fox should jump on it, he would break their stone wall down. Again, that's a figure of speech. It's saying it's not worth doing. Look at how frail it is. Look at how frail they are. Verse 4, hear our God. Now, Nehemiah, as he hears this, notice he goes and prays. This almost reads like a prayer journal. Like, here's what's going on, I'm praying about it. Here's what's going on, I'm praying about it. Here's what he said, I'm praying about it. And so here's the prayer. Hear, O our God, how we are despised. Return their reproach on their own heads and give them up for plunder in a land of captivity. This is what we would call an imprecatory prayer. Like, Lord, did you hear that? Get them. Now, Nehemiah is not going to try to get them. I'm not sure that he had the facilities to do that. But he's saying, Lord, you take them out. Verse 5, do not forgive their iniquity and do not let their sin be blotted out before you, for they have demoralized the builders. This is no way around this. This is an imprecatory prayer. Let me just say, there's a sense in which we pray an imprecatory prayer when we pray the Lord's Prayer. Think about how Jesus taught us to pray. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, we're not saying, Lord, cause your will to come if it's okay with other people out there. No, Lord, do it anyway. Do it in spite of them. Lord, we ask you to win and win big. Now, let me just say, if God causes somebody to win by making them into a Christian, that's cool. But if he does it some other way, that's cool too. Verse 6, so we built a wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height. And notice there's a progression here, for the people had a mind to work. And so very quickly, the wall's coming up. It's not finished yet. It's got a ways to go, but at least it's happening all across the entire area because everybody has their own assignment. Verse 7, now when Sanballat, Tobiah, and notice the list of people. You've got Sanballat, he's the governor. Tobiah, the guy from Ammon. The Arabs and the Ammonites. Tobiah is one of the Ammonites. And the Ashdodites. Ashdod is one of the cities, one of the Philistine cities out there on the coast. And all of these, that's in every direction. That's to the north, that's to the east, that's to the west, that's to the south. They're surrounded by enemies, and they heard that the repair of the walls of Jerusalem went on, it's continuing, and that the breaches began to be closed. They were very angry. First of all, they were angry, saying, hey, that's dumb, they'll never get it done. Now they're getting it done, and and now it's not just mockery, now it's anger that the Jews are going to actually accomplish something. Verse 8, and all of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disruption in it. They're actually going to take their anger, and they're not just going to mumble, they're not just going to pray to their gods, they're going to try to attack and undermine and kill people and stop the work. Verse 9, but we prayed to our God. And because of them, we set up a guard against them day and night. So notice there's prayer, but there's an also very practical guard that's set up to stop the enemy from coming in and doing what it desires to do. So there's prayer, but also the guard that's set up. The prayer, can I say it this way? The prayer and the practical. Verse 10, thus in Judah it was said, and this becomes a figure of speech, the strength of the burden bearers is failing, yet there is much rubbish, and we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. So the words are sort of going out, we're not going to get it accomplished, and yet they're continuing to work. So verse 11, our enemies said they will not know or see until we come among them, kill them, and put a stop to the work. We're going to bring it down. We're going to bring it very down. Now, that's chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, a conspiracy of opposition. Next, we're going to see the response to that opposition, verses 12. Let's look at that. Verse 12. When the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times. Now, I don't think that means, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. In other words, they kept hearing it. This is the word that's going out. This is the gossip of the day. They will come up against us from every place where you may turn. You never know where the attack's going to come. Verse 13. Then I stationed men in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, the exposed places, and I stationed the people in families with their swords, spears, and bows. He's ready to resist the attack. He's not going out and attacking them, but he's ready if the attackers come. They are ready to defend the walls. And notice they're doing this in the exposed places, the places where the wall isn't quite so high yet. Verse 14, when I saw their fear, I rose and spoke to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. So he's encouraging them, encouraging the people who are in charge, because as go the leaders, so will go the people. Verse 15, when our enemies heard that it was known to us, in other words, the word is out, and that God had frustrated their plan, then all of us returned to the wall, each one to his work. And so it turns out they're not going to be able to attack it. The Jews are ready for that. And now the work goes on. And it came about from that day on that half of my servants carried on the work, while half of them held the spears, the shields, the bows, and the breastplates, and the captains were behind the whole house of Judah. So they're ready for attack, but their readiness for attack is not stopping them from continuing to work. In fact, verse 17, those who were rebuilding the wall and those who carried burdens took their load in one hand doing the work and the other hand holding a weapon. They are ready, but they're also continuing the reliable work of the work. Verse 19, I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated on the wall far from one another. As they're doing the work, that wall goes around a bit, and it's not like you have a constant line of people everywhere. So there's places where there's people, building the wall, and then there's places where either they haven't gotten to yet, or the wall, maybe they've gotten that part up. Verse 20, at whatever place you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. And so notice, our God, we're trusting in the Lord, but also we're making plans to back up each other. They're getting attacked down there. Be ready. Listen for the trumpet. If you hear it, go there and help them. And so there's a strength in the Lord, but there's also strength in unity. God gave us himself, but the way he gave us himself sometimes is by giving us each other. Verse 21. So he carried on the work with half of them holding spears from dawn until the stars appeared, from dawn to dusk. They're ready to work, but they're also ready to protect. Now, some closing lessons from this section. We're not done with the whole section, but just from this point. When you do what's right, there's going to be opposition. Opposition comes. Trusting the Lord does not mean that there cannot be planned preparation. So Nehemiah is trusting God, but he's also preparing for the worst. He's also preparing for the attack. And then notice there's strength in planned cooperation. We're going to come and back you up if you need some help over here. You'll come and back us up if we need some help over there. And finally, we're part of a city. And we're not going to read the passage, but Hebrews 12 and 13 talk about how we belong to a heavenly city. And I'm not just talking about if you're Jewish, I'm talking about if you're God's people. So I think there is an application here for us. Now we continue. We had chapter 4, some threats from without, where the enemies were threatening to attack and tear down the walls. We come to chapter 5, and now it's threats from within. And here the problem is Jewish people who are hurting other Jewish people. The rich Jewish people are foreclosing on the lands of the poor who are doing the work of rebuilding the wall, and they're not being able to work their land and pay back the debts because they're working on the wall. And the rich people are getting richer by taking their property. Look at that, chapter 5, verse 1. Now there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, we, our sons and our daughters are many, therefore let us get grain that we may eat and live. You've got people doing the work, and they've got to eat to do the work. Verse 3, there were others who said, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses that we might get grain because of the famine. We haven't really read too much of a famine, but apparently things were going hard, and yet they're building the wall anyway. Verse 4, also there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields, on our vineyard. Remember, being part of the Persian Empire means that you have to pay taxes on that, and they did. Verse 5, now our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. Yet behold, we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves. I'm not talking about building the wall. I'm talking about literally selling their children into slavery in order to pay their taxes and to pay for the money that they need to feed themselves. And some of our daughters are forced into bondage already. And we are helpless because our fields and vineyards belong to others, because they were being repossessed. So verse 6, then I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words. I consulted with myself. He makes sure that he's got his facts right. But then notice, and contended with the nobles and the rulers. These are Jewish nobles. These are Jewish rulers, and said to them, "You are exacting usury." What is usury? That is, in other words, they were acting like loan sharks. They had loaned out money, and it's not just that they wanted their own money back, which they do. They're going to get that eventually, but they're doing it with interest, and that interest is escalating and compounding, where people couldn't pay back their loans, and in a timely manner. And so, therefore, these nobles and rulers are using that as the opportunity to foreclose on their homes, their farms, each one from his brother. Therefore, I held a great assembly against them. I said to them, we, according to our ability, have redeemed our Jewish brothers who were sold to the nations. We actually, if somebody had been sold into slavery, if somebody had been taken into captivity, if somebody was really having a difficult time there in Mesopotamia, we got them out of that problem, even spending our own money for them. And that's what we did. Now, would you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us? Are you putting people back into slavery? Notice they don't have anything to say to this. And then they were silent and could not find a word to say. Their actions had no defense. Verse 9, again I said, the thing which you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? It's one thing when the pagans do that to us, but are you acting like the pagans against your own spiritual, not just spiritual brothers, your own literal countrymen, your own people? And likewise, my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. So Nehemiah is doing this as well, along with his family. Please let us leave off this usury. Let's stop that. Verse 11, please give back to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive groves, and their houses, and also the 100th part of the money and of the grain, the new wine, the oil that you're extracting from us. You're causing them, you're getting richer at their poverty, at their destitution, at the loss of their of everything. And that's just not right. Verse 12, then they said, we will give it back and will require nothing from them. We will do exactly as you say. So they've been, let me just say, they've been properly shamed. Now, shame isn't always a good thing, but sometimes it is. Sometimes if you've done something shameful, then it's good to be ashamed and then do the right thing. And that's what takes place here. So I called the priests and took an oath from them. In other words, it's not just their say so, he's going to bind them to an oath. And remember, an oath is for life or for death. I took an oath from them that they would do according to their purpose, that they would keep their word. Let me just say, don't give your word if you're not going to keep it. Sometimes somebody will ask me something. I say, we'll see. I'll see if I can do that. Maybe not, maybe I won't be able to. But if you give your oath, they keep your word, and that's the point here. Verse 13, I also shook out the front of my garment. Now that's going to be, he's doing this literally, but it is indicative. We would say, I turned up my nose to him, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of some areas that we do something like this. I shook out the front of my garment and said, thus may God shake out every man from his house and from his possessions who does not fulfill this promise. Keep your promise. I'm holding you to that. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. So he's actually putting a curse on them if they don't keep their word. Now, if they keep their word, that's great. And all the assembly said, Amen, and they praised the Lord, and then the people did according to this promise. So the people keep the promise, even the rulers and the people that had been getting rich on the plight of the poor, they turn this around, and everybody is back to working together. Verse 14, notice this is a summary statement. Moreover, from the day that I was appointed to be their governor, this is going all the way back to when it all started, in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes, that's 12 years. For 12 years, neither I nor my kinsmen have eaten the governor's food allowance. You see, Nehemiah himself had a right to go and collect taxes and to support himself and his retinue, his kinsmen, his family. But he had not been taking advantage of that which was his legal right. Instead, he's been acting, well, can I say it in a New Testament sense? He's been acting Christianly. He's been acting like they're his brothers, not just his underlings. So we haven't been eating the governor's food allowance. He continues, verse 15, but the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine besides 40 shekels of silver. They had been doing that. Even their servants domineered the people. So yes, they'd been doing it, but I did not do so. Why? Because of the fear of God. So I had a right to do that, and the former governors had done that. That was the precedent. But I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Notice, even not just the governors, but their servants and, the hangers on. It had been a burden. Can I say the government can be a burden? Can I say this a little closer to home? And I want to be careful here. Churches can be a burden. Now, I don't think the church is called to be a burden. I think the church is called to be a help. And Nehemiah is showing us what that looks like, not getting rich. And I've heard of some pastors, and I'm not talking about my pastor. He's great, but I've heard of some pastors that are really wolves in the flock, and they're all about getting rich, and they're all about fleecing the flock rather than feeding the flock. And I've heard that story too many times. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like that. I like to think that's a rarity, but I don't really know. I haven't been in that many churches. But notice Nehemiah says, I didn't do that because I was more concerned about what God thinks. He continues, verse 16. I also applied myself to the work on this wall. We did not buy any land, and all my servants were gathered there. We were there not to get rich. We were there to do the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 Jews and officials. So yes, he's got quite a collection of people, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. So there were expenses, but he is meeting this. He's not putting that as a burden on the people. Verse 18, now that which was prepared for each day was one ox and 6 choice sheep. Also, birds were prepared for me, and once in 10 days all sorts of wine were furnished in abundance. Yet for all this, here it is, yet for all this I did not demand the governor's food allowance because the servitude was heavy on this people. So, in spite of the fact he's got some high expenses, but he's not relating those to the people. He's not causing it to be a burden on the people. This reminds me of the Apostle Paul. Remember what he did? Now, he didn't have to do this. But the Apostle Paul said, I would labor with my own hands to provide for my own needs and the needs of my team so that I wouldn't be a burden on certain churches. Now, it doesn't mean he never took money from churches when it was offered to him. At one point, the church at Philippi sends down some things to help him in the ministry, and he graciously accepts it. But he didn't say, no, now you guys got to pay me. He was willing to work with his own hands to support himself and his team in ministry. So the same thing here. I did not demand the governor's food allowance. I could have. I had the right to do that, but I did not do that. Verse 19, now we have the prayer again. Remember me, O my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Now, here's our overview of this section. We're not quite finished yet. We're going to go a little further. The walls were begun back in chapter 3. We had that list of builders. We saw that last time. Next, we saw the verbal opposition and the ridicule, and Nehemiah prayed, chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. We saw the plot to kill the workers and tear down the wall, to attack, and Nehemiah responded in prayer, in chapter 4, verses 7 through 23. The pivotal point was the outcry that we just looked at about the mistreatment of the poor. That's the pivotal point. Now there's going to be another plot to kill Nehemiah. and, and Nehemiah, and this time they're like, hey, come up and talk to us about this issue. But really, they're looking to get him alone and kill him. That's chapter 6. And Nehemiah responds in prayer. There is more verbal opposition. This time, instead of ridicule, this time it's intimidation. Like, we're going to take you down. And Nehemiah prays. And then finally, at the end of chapter 6, the walls are completed, chapters 15 through 19. And we have a list of those, not of the builders, but of those who were in opposition, those who were against the building. So notice that this whole structure of chapter 3 through 6. Look at the final verses of chapter 6. So the wall was completed on the 25th day of the month Elul in 52 days. 52 days, less than 2 months. That was a lot of work. That was a lot of labor. It was organized, and they got it done. Verse 16, when all our enemies heard of it, I mean, that was just phenomenal. And all the nations surrounding us saw it. They lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. There was no way that this ought to have been able to be done. They should have been years rebuilding this. And instead, they get it done in record time. Can I say in what looked to be supernatural time? Now, I'm not saying big giant rocks fell down from heaven, but they just really got this accomplished in an unbelievable amount of time. Verse 17, also in those days, many letters went from the nobles of Judah to Tobiah the Ammonite. Remember, he's one of the bad guys. And Tobiah's letters came to them. So there are nobles, but of Judah, that are writing to Tobiah, and he's writing back. And email, they didn't have email, but the ancient equivalent is sort of going back and forth. Verse 18, for many in Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan, had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah. They're related to people that are leaders and in the ministry. And because of these family relationships, there's a lot of undercurrent going on. And it continues, notice, in all those days. It doesn't just start now. It's been going on the whole time. Verse 19, moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds. Whose good deeds? Tobiah. Tobiah wasn't a good guy. He was out to do bad things, but they were saying, oh, he's not so bad. Notice trying to come to his defense in my presence. and reported my words to him. So his words are coming, of course, carefully edited, and then my words are going back to him. And then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Now, some application as we come to the end of this section. First of all, words can hurt. They really can. But be faithful anyway. Don't be dissuaded by words that are against you. Secondly, there are those who are united to God, and there are those who are united to each other, and they're not necessarily the same thing. Notice there were family connections, but they weren't godly family connections. They were family connections with unbelievers, and they were letting unbelievers have a say in a place where unbelievers shouldn't be having a say. So just because people are united doesn't mean they're united necessarily in a good way. Okay? Finally, ministry is messy. Ministry can be very messy. Continue to do ministry, even when there's a mess, because we're called to be faithful even in the mess.